Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome back to Watch One, and thanks for logging on. I feel like it's been months since I've been on the show. When you're used to doing a live thing every 48 to 72 hours, you sort of fall out of the rhythm when you're out of state.
Tell me about it. And the guys have been missing you as well. The audience has been a little unruly since you've been gone.
I apologize, guys, for the bait and switch with those recorded segments popping up. I did my best, but I recorded all three of them in one shot. We just broke between the takes. Guys, thanks for coming back. I've been in the mothership at Philadelphia. Our friends up at Govberg treated me well. They're fun folks. They're a young crowd. They always spoiled me, in this case with a grand Seiko dinner that included all of the Crador models. Life is good up there. So I'm here with Federico, and we're back. Yes, it's Wednesday, so this is the Wildcard show. Wildcard Wednesday is a little bit of your questions, a little bit of news, and a little bit of opinion. Of course, if you want to get your watch reviews in short segments, and you can't stand to hear me for more than 5 to 7 minutes, my new Watch You Want Watch Reviews channel has my old-style wristwatch reviews in a compact format that you can sneak between the office foreman's rounds. So I'm also available on the Social Pros podcast. I was interviewed by the Social Pros podcast, and it was a question basically about my career before and through my time at Watch One. So basically, where the heck did I come from? If you want to check that out, it's a good time. Social Pros podcast.
I'll leave a link to that in the description below.
Okay, I am not going to silence Federico anymore. We are going to riff on some new watches. Fed, we have the Breitling Chronoliner Blue. This is a big blue boutique variant of the 2015 Breitling Chronoliner, the watch that introduced ceramic to Breitling. What do you think of this one?
Well, I love blue. Everybody knows I love blue, but honestly, meh. I mean, it's cool that it's blue. I like it better, but the Chronoliner, I like the nouveau vintage kind of feel that it has.
Nouveau vintagey until you realize it's the size of a dinner plate, right? It's a 46mm watch.
Pretty much. It's more unwearable stuff to Breitling, more unsellable stuff by Breitling. And actually, yeah.
Avenger Hurricane 12H. 50mm. Compared to that, the new Chronoliner is quite compact.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, let me ask you this, Tim.
Yeah.
I know for a fact the Chronoliner is not a bestseller at Breitling.
Okay.
So what compels a brand to be like, oh, let's take something that's not particularly doing too well and make it a limited edition out of it?
Well, they only made 100 of them.
Which is truly limited.
Yeah, okay, I'll give them that. That's a sincere limited edition. I actually do like the Hurricane, I just don't have the wrist for it. Now, if you're like Thor or the Hulk, either one, you can wear that thing. I can't, personally. The Chronoliner at 46, I can just about pull it off, but this blue version is a better version of what was. I think the best version will be like a 44mm version of this watch.
Yeah, I mean, Breitling's always going to have a masculine and chunky look, which is why I won't be upset if it's a 44. I mean, I think a 44 is a very wearable size.
Yeah. But like this right here, this Avenger Blackbird, this is 44. That's now a reasonable men's watch.
Yeah, it is. And I just tried that on. I think it fits great. Whereas this Bright Light Avenger, even on my 8-inch wrist and my frame, it's just a completely ridiculous watch.
Yeah, so okay, Breitling, we like the idea. Blue is good. We like the fact that the B04 is now a reliable in-house caliber after many years of developments. It's got a GMT. It's a chronometer, 100-meter water resistant. You can wear this vaguely aviation-inspired watch just about anywhere. But I think it suffers from Breitling-itis, which is just sort of a mechanical pituitary excess. It's just too big.
Yeah, and I have no doubts about the quality. I'm sure it's a durable watch. It's a finely finished watch. But Breitling-itis is the case.
Yeah, I don't actually have a price for this watch, but just for reference, the standard Chronoliner on a strap is $7,600. I expect this one might be a little bit bigger, or in price, I should say. But yeah, 100 pieces, Breitling boutique only. Blue, they call it Aurora Blue dial. Really good looking. Aurora Blue ceramic bezel, really handsome, and a blue. It's called an Aero Classic strap. It's a rubber strap that's designed to look like a mesh bracelet. I don't know how they figure that, but whatever. Huh. It works with the watch.
It does.
And Breitling straps are great. So, look, if you're looking for a big blue Breitling, boom, they've got your number. Okay, so Fed, from a watch that many of us simply don't have the wrist to wear to a watch that perhaps many of us don't have the budget to wear but would love to. H. Moser and C is back with the Swiss Alp Watch Zzz. And yes, Zzz is the
part of the
variant.
name.
Yes. This is a take on 2016's most polarizing watch of the year. Well, other than the Pokemon thing. More on that in a moment. But this is the most polarizing watch that was not Romain Jerome or Hublot in 2016. It's back, and I can't imagine where the inspiration for this variant came from.
I wouldn't know what to tell you, Tim. I think it was just creative genius on the part of Edouard Mélin. I have no idea.
Just explain to our folks, who Edouard Mélin is and what his representation vis-a-vis the brand is.
Edouard Mélin is the CEO of H. Moser and Cia, and he happens to be a young guy with a great sense of humor. You don't have too many Swiss watch company CEOs that are under the age of 60. And
I was going to say 100.
Well, yeah, and Mr. Mélin, I believe, is in his mid-30s. So he's in touch with what's going on in the world. He's almost like one of the guys, and it really comes through with a lot of the tongue-in-cheek releases that H. Moser have been releasing lately.
Yeah, so he's a fun guy. Did a video in Lederhosen for SIHH, so he's definitely got a sense of humor about running the company and himself. And so the Swiss Alp watch was designed to look like, let's be honest, an Apple Watch. This version is designed to look like an Apple Watch on standby.
The black kind of screen, right?
Yeah, there's a black version of it which is just all blacked out, and then there's another version of it with a funky blue sunburst style, and this is something of a Moser signature. By the way, guys, we're hearing you tonight. There's some sort of lag. This is a problem with our net connection, like corporate-wide. There's nothing we can really do about it with the streaming equipment. Just bear with us and hope it improves. Comcast, I blame you.
And actually, since it is just internet lag, the full recorded show afterwards should be completely lagless.
Yes.
So, if you're having trouble right now, check in maybe half an hour.
Yeah. We don't want you to tune out. Bear with us if you can.
Yeah.
But we understand what you're dealing with, and we thank you for being with us tonight. So the idea basically here is that you've got the Swiss Alp watch, still white gold, still 38 by roughly 44, still stands on its own wire lugs as a worthy, beautifully made Swiss timepiece in its own right. It doesn't have to riff on the Apple Watch. By itself, if you've never seen an Apple Watch, you would say this is a beautifully made and attractive timepiece. So it's got that. But 10 millimeters thick, it's quite thin.
It is.
In spite of a rather deluxe movement with a 4-day power reserve, a very impressive solid gold escape and pallet wheel combination, a platform escapement that lifts out in one piece, and, obviously I mentioned that pricing is going to be a little bit prohibitive, but with 20 versions in the funky blue dial and 20 examples with the blackout standby dial, not many folks will get the chance to pay 26,550 Swiss francs for this watch.
And it will sell, in my opinion. I think they're probably pre-sold.
Yeah, they're very cool, and they're very desirable, and that's got to be the reason why this is now the third iteration of the Swiss Alp watch to hail from Moser. Now, that said, Fed, we're going to roll through our favorite and least favorite watches of 2017, and you've got a special edition in there. Let's go with your doghouse pick first, but then we'll go to that special edition that you called out.
The doghouse pick, the watch that I don't particularly love, which is strange because I love the brand, and it is a pretty all-around liked watch at its release, is the Cartier Drive Moonphase. I find the proportions to be very flat. I think Cartier's kind of played out their 1904 MC movement. Now they've added a Moonphase variant. But more so is I just don't get a driver's inspired watch with Roman numerals and a Moonphase. It just doesn't make sense. It's the Drive by Cartier, and you slap Romans and a Moonphase, there's nothing Drive about it.
Yeah, it's not like you're driving a team of horses. This super vintage look doesn't really work in the context. Now, don't worry, it works in the Cartier sense, but the modern sense of a driver's watch, we've come a long way since hand-cranked engines.
Exactly. So I might even like the watch significantly more if it didn't have the word Drive in the title.
Yeah, honestly, I'll say this too. The Moonphase in a driver's watch, it's like having a perpetual calendar in a diver's watch. It just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. The extra flat version of this watch was one of the best new watches of 2017. It could be considered the definitive drive to Cartier. 6.6 millimeters, thin, with a Piaget movement.
Of course.
That was a great watch. It's just the moon phase and the drive, the Cartier aesthetic.
I don't know. It's like they took a Piaget Imperador and it had a sun with the Vacheron Constantin 1931 Americaine, and I'm just not entirely sure, personally.
I'll say this. I thought Cartier nailed the driver's watch in a Cartier paradigm with the Roadster. I thought that was a great take on a watch that looked like something Cartier could have designed in its 20th century heyday, but it was evocative, modern, stylish, a little edgy. I loved the way the strap change system worked. There were good calibers, rock solid, accurate calibers in there.
The details with the screws, it actually looked like a Roadster, its namesake. You know, it looked like a car.
The way the crown guard actually flowed seamlessly into the curvature of the magnifier of the date, of the Cyclops eye on the crystal. It was really well done. That was a Cartier driver's watch.
Absolutely. And actually, the crown just looked like a 1950s hubcap as well.
Yeah. So, Cartier, bring back the Roadster. The Panthère, that was not the one to revive.
It wasn't.
If we're going to be looking at a Cartier Walking Dead reference, please don't let it be a small ladies' quartz watch from the 80s. Bring back the Roadster. Second, the extra flat. We love it. Cartier, we still love you. We're still friends. It's just that one model, moon phase and a driver, doesn't work.
I adore Cartier, and I always will.
Okay, so now tell us, by the way, $7,800 US to $21,000 for the drive to Cartier moon phase. Not going to happen for us. Tell us about your faves, Federico.
Well, the first one is an easy pick for me, and everybody knows I'm going to say it, but it's the JLC, and yes, that is me, not Tim saying this, the JLC Master Control Sector Dial variant, all of them, particularly the chronograph, is just... Man, it's just a sexy watch. There's no better adjective. It's a beautiful... I know I've complained a little bit about too many vintage throwbacks, but it really works with that blue sector dial. It speaks to me in so many levels.
Okay, and a good value at $8,000. Negotiate a little bit. I'm not going to say it's exactly $8,000, but that is the recommended retail price. Mm-hmm. And it's a good value because you get a solid movement, you get an artisanal name. I mean, this is not a strictly mass-produced watch. This is not Breitling. This is not Omega. This is not Rolex. No. There is a certain degree of hand labor, regulation, assembly, and finishing involved in this watch. Plus, I like the fact that it's a historically inspired watch that's not a slavish tribute. There is no vintage JLC chronograph that looks like this.
It's a vintage look without being the tribute. So it's not lazy in essence. It's a new design with a vintage feel.
Because we got a little bit cynical after the tribute to Polaris, and the tribute to Memovox Parking, and the tribute to Deep Sea, and the tribute to 1931, and the tribute to Geophysic. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You reading me? You feeling me?
No more.
I like the sector dial chrono, but you didn't stop there. What else have we got?
I didn't. And actually, this watch, the press release, my next pick, the press release was widely distributed today. And it's a brand that I have not always spoken very highly of, but it's the new Tudor Black Bay limited edition for the Italian watch forum Orologi e Passioni, Watches and Passions, with a beautiful commemorative caseback and Italian writing in red on the dial. So it is still very much a Black Bay, but that little extra flair of it being in Italian, it being in red text on the dial just makes a watch I kind of like into a watch I absolutely must have. Unfortunately, I think they only made, 50?
50 pieces for the forum members. This was announced in April, guys. They got the jump on us, and at 3,500 euros, these went fast.
Sold out. But if you guys know where I can get one, please shoot me an email, Federico at Watch You Want.
Yeah. So, by the way, very cool idea. We always love forum specials because that's where the true believers live. IWC has kind of owned this in the modern era. Great to see Tudor getting into it. And actually, Tudor doing a couple of micro editions recently. There's this in Bucherer.
The Bucherer with the blue dial, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful as well. Actually, things started getting a little on the string. I started getting this feeling when they released the left-hand drive Pelagos with that numbered caseback.
Yes.
Even though it's technically not limited, they just happen to number every single one.
Well, I also want to say, those of you who are still with us, thank you. I understand we are having catastrophic internet issues tonight. Aside from my third world motel internet connection right now, the content of this episode is really great. So if you want to come back and watch the recorded show later tonight, as soon as this buffers, it's going to play normally as a recording. That said, you guys who are in the live chat box, I appreciate it. You are super. Bearing with us, thank you very much. And from there, I'm going to segue to my own best and worst of 2017.
Oh, these are good ones.
Okay, this is not just the worst watch of 2017. And it's not just that they took the worst watch of 2016 and made it worse. This might be the worst watch of all time. I mean, aside from watches built expressly for like fascist governments that were like actually evil, the Romain Jerome Pokemon Tourbillon Piece Unique, taking the worst watch of 2016 and making it so much worse and more expensive. Now, for the low price, and I'm seeing conflicting reports, but somewhere between $200,000 and $258,000 US dollars, you too can have a tribute to Pokemon Go and its 5 minutes of fame.
You know what the best part about this watch is, Tim?
That it's 48 millimeters in black PVD steel?
No, they only made one. They only made one.
If you're that one guy, that one guy, all I can say is, sir, you have no soul. No, speechless. Pure speechless. That's all I can say. I'll say this, the dial is more interesting than the old one. It's lacquered and it's nicely painted. That said, I mean, it's a freaking $250,000 Pokemon watch with a drop-in, tourbillon caliber that they bought someplace and probably put the whole thing together for like, I don't know, what do you think, $30,000, all parts and work complete?
The most expensive part of this whole thing is, I'm sure, the license to put Pikachu on the dial.
That's true, and again, the license is so important that on the backside, copyright 2017, the Pokemon Company. Yes, it actually says that. Like on some sort of like toy candy lollipop that's got like a toy with a light and a lollipop attached. That for $250,000 on your wrist.
More money than sense, my friend.
Yeah, so, okay, let's detox. My favorites. Now, these are good, and because I'm the mad czar of this place, I have 3, not 2. Okay, so the Zenith Defy El Primero 21. This is a watch in all of its varieties that I love. First of all, I said prior to Basel World that Zenith really needed to make a statement. They needed a big year. They still need a big year, and then they need another big year after that. There's a lot of rebuilding to be done, but this was the best possible way to start. Take the 5 Hz high beat El Primero movement, skeletonize it, open it up, increase the chronograph frequency to 50 Hz. Then put the whole thing together in an accessibly priced timepiece that blends a little bit of historic lines with a ton of contemporary sensibility, and you get the Defy El Primero 21 and its caliber 9004. Now, Fed, this is not just a wholesale revision of the classic El Primero, but it's also an innovative use of carbon fiber as a hairspring on both of the 2 independent escapements in this movement.
I mean, first of all, bravo, bringing back the Defy name was something, because the Defy was synonymous with...
for a while there, we're borderline Pokemon territory.
Exactly, and now this is a very strong way to bring the name back. As for the El Primero movement, I mean, before this was released, everybody was saying, the rumor was the new El Primero 2, right? Zenith was coming out with an El Primero 2. Now, that hasn't quite happened, but significant changes were made.
Yeah, and I'll say great job leveraging the otherwise unobtainable and unusable high-beat chronograph technology from Tag Heuer and Guy Simone's laboratory that's kind of been spun down a bit since Tag refocused on lower-end watches. Not lower-end, but more accessibly priced.
Yes.
They're not so much about the Microterre and the V4 Monacos anymore. So it's good to see some of that technology being transferred over to Zenith, where it has more of a natural home, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and actually that's a great example of how a watch group should work. Like LVMH sharing across brands. And having worked in a watch group like Richemont, I can tell you it's usually much more a competitive atmosphere than a
Yeah.
collaborative atmosphere.
And it's good to see that sharing. It's also good to see that this watch wasn't priced like deep into the 5 figures or 6 figures, because all those high-end Tag Heuer watches generally were inaccessible. They were showpieces. Zenith needed a watch that people could buy to resurrect its image. We've seen the Christophe Coulomb, the Hurricane. We've seen the Georges Favre-Jacot. We know they can make crazy stuff. But between 10,600 and 12,600 for the 3 versions of this 44mm titanium watch with a real high horology movement, Zenith has put the watch right in kind of the meat of the steel Daytona market. So now you're talking something that,
It's a value prop.
yeah, someone who's looking to buy high horology can get into. It's not an entry-level watch, but for this degree of complexity, it's definitely an entry-level to high horology complication. I mean, this is something I would put up there with like the JLC Duomet, the Longa Datograph. I would really put it up there with something. I mean, even if you look at the Rack and Snail Minute Jumper and the 5170, all of these high horology technologies that are priced well into the 5 figures, all of a sudden in Zenith you've got a sports watch you can wear every day that gives you a lot of that same tech intrigue with a few technologies we haven't seen before.
All I can say is sign me up. I mean, I think, when you consider that it's about the same price as a steel Daytona,
Yeah.
it's fantastic, and I hope this really catapults Zenith into creating more watches like this, because as you have said many times, they don't particularly have an icon, right? The El Primero has no face.
The El Primero is a movement. It's a pile of springs and wheels, and most people, if they saw it with the name scratched off just sitting on a table as a caliber, they'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. Watches have to have a face. There's a reason F.P. Journe says, when I start a watch design, I decide what it's going to look like first. And that's coming from a watchmaker's watchmaker. Design icons are important. This is the start of that and a new chapter mechanically for the El Primero. So I like it. Now, Fed, my second favorite is actually a watch that took me by surprise because I was at SIHH this year, not Basel. So I didn't actually see the proper rollout of the Bulgari Octo Finissimo automatic. And now, they were kind enough to send me one for a showcase review on my Govberg channel, and I really didn't get the full gravity of what they were doing. I mean, look, the thing...
It's not even in focus.
Exactly. I can't get focus on the 5.15 millimeter thickness of this watch. What I can show you is that they gave it a full-sized 36 millimeter in-house micro rotor caliber. Now, this is the kind of watch that's normally so thin it comes with handling restrictions. Watches like this from other brands that shall remain nameless have had, for instance, no water resistance. No shock protection. If you strap them, watches like this from other brands, if you strap them to your wrist too tightly, the hands will contact the crystal or the crystal will pop out. The Bulgari is a real watch. First of all, it's got shock protection. Second of all, 3 ATM water resistance, just like any standard dress watch. Finally, strap it down on your wrist. This thing's not going to pop apart or stop running. It's a real-world watch with a spectacular 2.25 millimeter micro rotor caliber, and even that's not really being fair. It's actually slightly thinner than that. So this is a spectacular watch that just blindsided me.
My only thing is, and
Okay.
I've worked for a company that did ultra thin in Piaget, is the fact that, I mean, it's extremely well built, and I'm extremely impressed. But add the fact that it's titanium, and the watch is almost unsettlingly light.
And thin. And here's the thing. Like, I've got a swatch sitting on that counter behind me that is heavier and thicker than this. This is so thin, they even attached a non-stitched leather strap to it. You see, the strap is actually alligator and calf, and it's been bonded together. It's very supple, very smooth, and very thin. Everything about this watch is almost unsettlingly light and thin, and I love it for that. This is one of the most impressively engineered and executed mainstream watches that I've seen this year. So for between roughly 12,500 and 13,500, depending on whether you get it on the bracelet, for me, that is one of the best watches of 2017.
Bravo, Bulgari.
Okay, and so from another brand that's a little bit niche, I had to throw in another chronograph because I beat up on the chronograph in my favorite complications video from about a week back. I didn't have a conventional chronograph in there. I'm making up for lost time tonight. So Fed, the Parmigiani Bugatti Aeroleith Performance Flyback Chrono from SIHH.
What a beauty is all I can say. I mean, I love the detail on the dial. They really thought this one out.
Yeah.
From the colors to the strap, it just works very, very well. I haven't played with it yet, though, so I can't really speak to the feel of the watch. But I think you have, haven't you?
Yeah, I have worn it, I've used it, I've experienced it firsthand. I have to say, first things first, it's difficult to capture this watch in photos. It has a sort of three-dimensional volume and character to it. It's almost like trying to portray sculpture in two-dimensional photos.
You don't catch all the lines, right? In the pictures, you can't really see
the case band. The case band of the watch has a sort of hobnail pattern that matches the dial. And the case band is beautifully profiled. First of all, you have those teardrop lugs, which don't translate well on a photograph, but are sublime on the wrist. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the texturing of the case band, the profiling of the chronograph pushers. It is a flyback chronograph. It's a Parmigiani in-house automatic, so it's got the pedigree, and Parmigiani makes every part of a watch.
Yes, they do. Even their hairsprings, correct?
Yeah, they have roughly 5 satellite companies that are just kind of like a cottage industry integrated into a single brand. It's like all the cottages stayed together, and as Parmigiani accumulated these micro manufacture components, they all retained their kind of local flavor. People in Switzerland don't move, they don't fold up shop, and they don't collectivize. So Michel Parmigiani, building his manufacturer since 1996, let them remain as long as everything works toward a common purpose. Sometimes that misfires because a watch will seem more like an assembly of parts, and the design doesn't quite click. With the Bugatti, and I'm by no means a huge fan of co-branding auto and watches. Wheels and watches could work, it doesn't always. This is an example in color, in form, in complication, and 41 millimeters in titanium. They nailed it.
Now that you bring this up, actually, I don't think I've ever liked any automobile and watch co-branding apart from this one.
You know, I'm obviously given to the JLC Amvox series. I love the Amvox 2, I own one, and I love the 7 because it's basically a 2 with a power reserve and a quick release strap. But this is a great example of a watch that stands on its own lugs, as I like to say. And then you add the Bugatti link, and the coloration is subtle.
The coloration is one of the best parts of the watch, in my humble opinion.
A little bit of red, a little bit of blue, a lot of bit of black, and of course the white metal. And in titanium, that's sporty, that works. This is a watch that succeeds on every level, aesthetically, mechanically, and conceptually. And I'd have to say, and some folks within Parmigiani I've spoken to knew this was a problem. Previously, a lot of their watches on paper had it all going for them, but in terms of aesthetic execution, often stopped like 15% short of perfection. Recently, I've seen them fix this with the Chronor Anniversary Chronograph, with the Couture Annual Calendar in white gold I really love, all versions of the Pantograph, and now with the Aeroleith, the Toric Chronomet that they released, the chronometer version of the Toric, the revival of Michel Parmigiani's first design, the Tonda 1950 micro rotor in steel,
especially with that dial. With the dial is fantastic.
They're on a winning streak now. I think they've really got their act together. Marketing, relevance, getting the word out, that's where we have to do our jobs, I think, as watch enthusiasts.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of these brands. Parmigiani is definitely doing better, but for example, a lot of guys never even heard of Lang & Heine before we even brought them up.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because it's one of those brands whose virtues are like inversely proportional to like their publicity. So we need to change that. Guys, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Normally, we do live questions and answers, and honestly, that's my favorite part.
It's the part I look forward to the most, actually.
So let me see if I can find one or two from our live chat box, and we can riff on that a little bit. Don Gizzle asking, is that a 116619 LB white gold sub in front of Tim? Yes, it is. That was an easy question.
The Smurf.
Okay. And let me see if I can find some questions so we can do a little bit of live Q&A. Granted, it's going to be live. Most of you folks are going to watch this recorded, and we understand cable problems tonight. Bad. Lesson learned. Okay.
We can't do anything about it either.
Okay, so here's a great question. And what do you think, Fed, This is a crazy question because he's asking, how would you compare Rolex subs and a JLC Deep Sea Vintage chronograph?
I mean, they're very, very different. I think a sub is a better all-rounder. I don't love the vintage deep sea chronograph just because the look doesn't speak to me, but it's a watch with a ton of personality. You know, one's a chrono, one isn't. One's a true dive watch, one isn't. You know, one is more of a tool watch, one is more meant to look like a tool watch, you know?
Yeah, I think for down and dirty, you go with the sub.
Yeah.
For a more genteel, vintage inflected look, maybe you go with the Deep Sea Vintage. But I would say if you go to one of the bigger 44 Deep Sea chronos, now you've got more of a dive watch, or more of a hardcore sports watch at least. At least we have 100-meter water resistance, greater size, some diving features. That's the more, I'm going to say more, not perfect, but more appropriate comparison. The Deep Sea Vintage Chrono is very old school. It's kind of a what-if thought experiment. What if there were a Deep Sea Chrono circa 1959?
Yeah, and I don't even think like the sailcloth-ish strap it comes in can even get wet because it's got a calf back.
Yeah, so you're going to have, it's true, it's designed to look like an old Tropic strap, but it's actually embossed calf. So yeah, you're going to have to swap it out onto some sort of textile. But it would rock a NATO quite effectively.
Yes,
one of the few watches I would say, yeah, definitely a NATO. So Fed, here's some questions from Glenn Line. I'm looking at a new Rolex Datejust 41 millimeters with blue dial. Would you wait for the Baselworld's new release, or would you recommend I haggle hard on the current model with my AD?
That's a tough one, Glenn. I mean, personally, I'd wait for the Baselworld release because I think the new proportions just suit the watch better. However, if you really like the current iteration, maybe your AD might be inclined to get rid of the one he has in stock. I'm not so sure. But personally, I'd stick with the Baselworld release. I think it's a more nicely proportioned watch.
Yeah, the new Baselworld release is a nice watch. I will say this, though. If you're looking at the current watch and you like it and you think the deal is better, nothing about the new watch would change the fact that you like the old one. If you found your watch, I say pull the trigger. If you're lukewarm on it, then wait. Trust me, Rolex is not Patek Philippe. You will eventually see one in inventory, and you'll get to try it on. And if at that point you like it, buy it.
Very solid advice.
Now, Fed, another question from Anthony, and Anthony G is asking, Speedmaster 57 on a 6 1/4 inch wrist. Should I pull the trigger? I love the movement, but it sits a tad high on my wrist. He's saying it's a 39 millimeter, so we're not talking about the Speedmaster automatic coaxial 57. We're talking, I guess we're talking the literal Speedmaster 57 that came out this year at Baselworld. What do you think on a 6 1/4 inch wrist?
39 millimeters should work rather well with that wrist size. I've never been bothered by watches that are too thick. Then again, I do own a few Valjoux 7750s in my collection. I also own three Panerais, but one of them's a radio mirror, so it's thin, it doesn't count. I think if you wear dress cuffs every day, then maybe you should try it on with a button-down shirt. But if you don't, I think you may get used to it. I mean, I'm not sure, Tim. I've never had that problem.
I would say realistically, if you want to check out a 6 1/4 inch wrist with something like the Speedmaster 57, check out my old wrist review of the first Omega in space. That should give you a very close parallel in terms of shape and size, both of watch and of wrist. Then you'll have a rough idea of how it looks and you can decide. But rest assured, with far more than 3,000 of these being made, you'll get your chance to try one on. So there's no harm in waiting. You'll have a chance to put it on the wrist and try before you buy.
Absolutely.
And just to clarify what I was talking about earlier, there are a couple of Speedmasters now that are referred to as the Speedmaster 57. The primary ones being this year's tribute watch, the anniversary timepiece at Baselworld, and then the other being the Speedmaster coaxial automatic 57 family, which is an entirely different bird and 41.5 millimeters roughly.
Yeah, that's, well, is it 41.5? I thought they were even bigger with the new automatic coaxials.
There are bigger coaxials in 44 1/4, but the specific one that's known as the Speedmaster 57, that one is 41.5.
Gotcha.
Joseph Jordan asking, anyone have thoughts on the Tudor Black Bay 36? Another one of our friends from Basel this year. Fed, what do you think?
I like it. It's a nice Explorer 1 alternative, especially if you like the vintage Explorer 1. Well, not quite vintage, but the previous generation, or rather 2 generations ago, because the new one is 39. It's nice to have a sportier watch in that size range. However, I don't see it as a bestseller for them. I think it's more for the people that love the vintage-inspired watches or who genuinely have a smaller wrist. I think it's a winner, maybe not commercially, but at the very least, design-wise, I think it was a nice choice.
Okay. Guys, thank you for joining us tonight. I really have to give a shout out to everyone who slugged it out through the connection issues. I'm very sorry about that, but for once, it's beyond my control. I'm happy to say that it wasn't my mic and it wasn't my encoding computer. But Fed, thank you for joining me tonight.
Anytime, brother. I love doing these.
These are some of the best shows we do, and I love them. I look forward to them. I also want to thank my colleague, Rafael Dominguez, working the switcher, loading the graphics, keeping me on topic and on time tonight. Thank you for joining us. Those of you who are going to watch this recorded, you shouldn't have any of the issues people had live. But I want to advise you that if you want to see a smaller, shorter, more succinct segment featuring me and watches, Watch You Want Watch Reviews, my all wrist review channel. Check it out, subscribe. I think you'll enjoy.
Link in the description below.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll be back on Friday with This Week in Watches featuring myself and Josh Thanos. Until then, I'm Tim, he's Fed, he's Raph, this is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.
Take care.